So you can see on the map, this is one of my favorite roads in the area, and it's giving me confidence. There's no guardrails here. If I go off, I go off. Welcome back, I'm Tedward. Welcome to beautiful, sunny Southern California, a much needed reprieve from the New England winter that I've been living through, and welcome to the all-new 2025 Acura ADX. This is an A-Spec advanced trim level. It comes in around $45,000, and I genuinely believe that this ADX is the missing link in the Acura lineup. So we'll have to talk about why this matters. The first reason why I think this matters is that I know a lot of folks that want an Integra and it would fit their lives perfectly, but for whatever reason, they absolutely need either A, an SUV like this, or B, all-wheel drive, and the Integra only comes in front-wheel drive. But now they're able to get this based on the Integra platform with all-wheel drive and a 1.5-liter turbo engine. This is significant. It makes 190 horsepower, 179 pound-feet of torque, and that matters because HR-V only comes with that 2-liter Atkinson cycle 4-cylinder, no turbo. And although I love the HR-V, which this is also based on, it's a shared platform, that 2-liter can feel a little anemic. It handles fantastic and it's a great car, but if you're looking for a little punch off the line, you're not really going to find it in that vehicle, whereas now you can basically get a luxury HR-V with the 1.5-liter turbo that we've all kind of grown to love in the Acura world. But before you just say this is an HR-V that they slap some leather on, I want to say I think they styled this and proportioned it properly, because this is not a case of Civic versus ILX back in the day, where the ILX really did look like a Civic that they just put an Acura badge on. I think they did a great job styling this car. I think it looks like its own thing, especially from the front, the side, and this quarter panel. Maybe the rear end shares a little HR-V DNA and looks a little Honda-ish, but I don't think that's a bad thing. So before we get out and see how it drives, let's take a look around. I'll show you the amenities and the luxuries of the vehicle. This is the top trim level, but every trim level is available in both front-wheel drive and all-wheel drive. Add $2,000 for all-wheel drive. They get about 30 miles per gallon, which is pretty darn good. Gluing us to the road on a beautiful 19-inch wheels, and the wheels vary by trim level. You've got a 235 section tire, and then this one is an urban gray, kind of like a Sonic gray, but slightly different than the Honda color. Around back, you've got the dual exhaust coming out. It looks pretty aggressive and sporty, and they're not shy about the design language. I really dig this. This kind of reminds me of FK8 Honda Civic Type R stuff right here. But inside is where this thing really starts to shine and start to feel pretty darn upscale. In the top trim level, you can get these orchid leather seats. They have the suede blue trim, and man, these are a lot of fun. And they make a red one too. I think the red ones, to me, it's a little too loud. I say that coming as a Civic Type R owner with red seats, but in this, I think this suits the car just perfectly. Heated and ventilated seats. You've got a leather wrap steering wheel that's heated, and then you get leather accents all around. These seats have fantastic lumbar support, very adjustable, and oh baby, does this have a sound system for you. This has a Bang & Olufsen 15-speaker sound system, not the ELS 3D that you would find on the Integra. I haven't compared them back to back. However, this is very, very good. It always felt like the ELS 3D maybe just kind of punched up that bass a little bit and added a bit more to what was originally in the cars on the base level. This Bang & Olufsen, worth every penny. I'm into it. I like it. So I just think that this really does bring what is otherwise an HR-V into a much higher scale feeling vibe. In the back, this seat has just essentially moved back and reclined into its exit position, so I would be sitting way further ahead, and I still have legroom. I have USB-C ports down here. I have HVAC stuff back here, which is nice. This is stuff you don't get on like a Civic, and I think that's important, because otherwise, inside the passenger space is very similar to that of a Civic. And then up here, you have a moonroof, and this is power. The sunshade is power, which I think is pretty upscale for this, because they easily could have just made that manual. Couple cup holders here with your armrest, and there you go. It's a 60-40 split. Let me show you the cargo space, because this is one of those practical vehicles that you're probably going to want to know these things. Power lift gate. And there you go. If you pop those seats down, you're going to have a ton of space back here. There's just a couple little cubbies and a jack. Oh my goodness, you're getting a spare tire. Let's go. This is the stuff. See, this is the funny things. I don't really read this in the press release, but if I discover them, I'm pretty psyched. That is amazing. Okay, color me impressed. Bring back the spare tire. Thank you, Acura. Real quick, let me show you under the hood. Oof, yes. This is a little bit of cost savings. They did not put struts on here. There's just a hood prop. But yeah, there you go. This is our very tried and true familiar 1.5 liter turbo. It does the job. I think a lot of people look at 1.5 liters and they think, oh no, that's a little small. But I'm telling you, it's a torquey little engine. It makes peak torque at 1700 RPM and it pulls you up to $5,000. So it just does the job. Anyway, let's close it up and take it for a ride, because I think Honda and Acura typically make good driver's cars, even when they're sort of practical luxury things for a more entry-level market, which is really exciting. Let's get on the road. To start the ADX, foot on brake, we've got our push to start button over here. And then there's the familiar glass display, which I actually really like. Of course, I always prefer analog gauges with needles. However, when the screen is not just tacked on like a little tablet and it's actually buried in a dashboard the way this is, it ends up fitting in really nicely. And this, yep, some people begrudge a tacked on screen. I think it works really well. I've had it in my Civic Type R and my Civic Si when I had that, and it's functional and it works. They've also improved this. It's lag-free, as they say, so we're not in a situation like in the older cars where you need to disable navigation. The Honda files know what I'm talking about, in order to free up a little bit of RAM for that to work properly. This works great, and with the highest trim level, you get Google built in as well. Of course, it has Apple CarPlay, wireless, and wireless charging. I'm an old man, and I typically stick to my wired thing with the USB-C just to make sure that there's no hiccups. The first thing you interact with is this nice steering wheel, and it's heated, and it's heated like everywhere really nicely. I say this because some cars only heat the 9 and 3 or the 10 and 2 or certain locations on the steering wheel. This is heated pretty much all around, and that's really nice. And then, are you kidding me? Paddle shifters, metal paddle shifters. We have a normal shift lever. This is good stuff. No finicky button things, which I'm not against buttons. I just think that when I'm in a scenario, when I'm in a car, sometimes it's an unfamiliar car, and I'm just trying to do a 3-point turn real quick, I want to be able to quickly put it in reverse and drive and not have to look at anything. The less I have to look at something, the more ergonomic it is. And I'm starting to hope that car makers are going to realize that this is actually a really smart way to go. HVAC controls, buttons, knobs, switches, buttons, knobs, and switches that we like. They have done such a great job of taking relatively inexpensive materials and making them feel upscale. This is why you can get into an entry-level 11th gen Civic and feel good about your purchase and not feel like you're in a penalty box. You've got heated seats here, you've got ventilated seats here, and these are some of the nicest ventilated seats I've ever felt. My Lexus GX460 has ventilated seats. They do not blow the way these do. Great, vast sunroof, and we can close that up with a power sunshade. I know I'm getting into the weeds here, but this is the kind of stuff that you're looking for in that luxury market. You've got a little bit of space for some shades, great, and then center console space as well, nice and deep and cavernous. My problem with this is it doesn't slide forward, and my elbow naturally rests right here, not here. I wish I could move that. Make sure you sit in these cars before you buy and make sure it's going to work for you. Otherwise, she's ready to go. We have 5 driving modes in the top tier, I think 4 in the lower one, so you can set an individual mode. Auto start stop you can turn off, and with 7-degree grade, it has downhill assist, so you can set the speed you'd like it to do if you're doing some, I guess, off-roading in your ADX. Unlikely, but hey, who am I to judge? I do weird stuff in cars all the time. First, we're gonna set off on some lightly windy roads and get a feel for the car. Then we're gonna come here, we're gonna do some of the tight hairpins, and then we're gonna go out to the highway and see how it behaves. This is a daily driver for all occasions. Let's start out on some somewhat fast windy roads, then we'll get into some tighter stuff, and then we'll test it out on the highway. This chassis is so rigid and tight. It's one of the things that I love most about the Civic and Integra of this generation of car. And despite the fact that this may be slightly underpowered relative to its German peers in the BMW, Audi, and Mercedes world, we'll say, like, handling-wise, this really impresses. Like, I find this to be more playful than an MDX on these roads, because I've driven these roads in the MDX. And I need to secure my stuff because, like, the G-forces are batting it all around. But really, I mean, this is the thing too, is I'm not doing this as like some ham-fisted lunatic that's just trying to make some tires squeal. It actually kind of behaves nicely. My only gripe, I think, is with the CVT. It feels like sometimes it changes the ratio a little bit, and it means that you have to be very, very delicate on that throttle mid-corner because you may be getting a slightly different thing than predicted, which is something that you would simply just adjust to and get used to. This is really my first time playing with the car. So you can see on the map, this is one of my favorite roads in the area. There's all kinds of nice little twisties, and we're gonna get a feel for what this thing can do handling-wise, but also just, is it fun to drive? I think one of the reasons you buy an Acura product is because it's fun to drive. And you want it to be predictable and neutral, and you don't want the car to just understeer and plow when you go around a corner. And you also don't want to be scared by it. You don't want it to be twitchy or weird. It responds so quickly when I lift off that throttle. So if it starts to push that nose, I just adjust. And that's what's great, is like, it just behaves the way you want a vehicle to behave. I'm not chasing the car. I'm never behind the car. It feels like I'm right on top of it. We don't need this car to be a track star athlete, but what we do need it to do is to be fun and enjoyable to handle. And when a car has good handling, I find them to be safer, just because it allows you to avoid situations in a more predictable manner. Because imagine you're in a car that doesn't handle that great, but you're like, well, who cares? It's a luxury car, or it's just not what its intended purpose is. Well, that's a problem if you need to make an emergency maneuver, because you've got to throw the car side to side and the thing is top heavy and rolls, or it slides, or it plows. Well, you're not going to make that maneuver. So, you know, this test sometimes may look a little silly when you're like, why do I need my Acura ADX to be able to climb this mountain like an athlete? Well, you maybe don't, but you maybe do need it to be able to quickly change direction without losing control and potentially injuring the family. I haven't needed to touch these little paddles to tell it where to be in the rev range. The CVT is doing a pretty darn good job of just keeping me in the power band. And, you know, I gotta say, I know it's down on power relative to the German competition, but I have a lot of torque, and I think the CVT actually does a lot of good in this scenario because it always keeps it in the correct gear ratio. So it's not gear hunting, it's just where it needs to be basically at all times. They're pretty quiet tires. Maybe I'm just being more gentle than I should be, but I was expecting this to be squealing like a pig, and it's not. It doesn't feel light, but it also doesn't feel chunky or heavy. It actually feels appropriate. Wish I had a little more padding down here on my knee, but, you know, that's okay. This is a fair concession. This isn't the normal use case for this car. The suspension setup is great. It's tight, it's a little compliant, so it really does do the job of balancing canyon carving abilities and luxury feel. You know, that's a tricky balance to find, but, you know, at 3,600 pounds, this is the heaviest variant of the ADX because it's all-wheel drive, and it has all of the sound insulation and all of the, you know, heavy leather and that kind of stuff. It still doesn't feel too heavy. It's obviously going to naturally fall into an understeer mode versus an oversteer mode for the safety of the public, but does feel pretty neutral. Let's play with these paddles a little bit. You know, obviously it's saying like D3, and that's not a real, it's not really a gear. It's a CVT, but it is holding a ratio for me. Drop it into sport mode. See if that changes anything. If you've driven an Integra or a Civic, it should feel pretty familiar. I mean, this is the same sort of architecture and powertrain as an Integra. It's just a slightly bigger package. This all-wheel drive system can send over 50% of the power to the rear wheels, so it's not some jokey little all-wheel drive system that's like barely powering the rear. If it needs it, it can send it there. The brake pedal feel is different than I think any Honda or Acura product I've ever felt. I don't know if it's just me today or if it is different. It's still positive. It just feels slightly more synthetic, like the rebound of the pedal or something. I can't put my finger on it, but I'll have to talk to one of the engineers and figure that out. But if you do test drive that, let me know what you think about this brake pedal. When they launched the HR-V, I just remember going out and caning that thing through some Pacific Northwest mountain roads and thinking, wow, how sharp, how incredible. And yeah, it was disappointing when you get on it from a dig and try to do a 0 to 60. It's not fast, but this 1.5 liter, if you were dissuaded from the HR-V based on that power, this should solve that problem if you were in the market for that vehicle. It really, and you're gonna be in a nice, luxurious place. This is a pretty stellar place to be. It may be because I own a Honda, but everything in this car is so ergonomic and easy to use. I never have to hunt for stuff. And I think if you were renting this, you wouldn't have to hunt for stuff. It's super frustrating when you get into cars that really tout their technological prowess and look at all the stuff we've jammed into the car. And then you end up in a position where you're like, dude, I can't find anything. I just want to adjust a mirror. I just want to do simple things. And you can't. And it's giving me confidence. There's no guardrails here. If I go off, I go off. I mean, it's a mountain. These are cliffs. These are very real cliffs. This is not a video game. And yeah, I'm just completely unconcerned if I were to push the car a little bit, whether or not it's going to behave the way I'd like it to. In terms of driver comfort, this seat's really nice. It's not too cramped. It's not squeezing me. Pretty large people could probably fit very comfortably in this seat, and it's relatively supported with the side bolsters, but it's, you know, you still might slide around a little bit in a corner. And then the seat gets nice and low. I like the seating position in this because it's where I'd like to be. I don't feel like I'm sitting way up tall. You can if you'd like, but for me, I typically go with a lower seating position. And even with that lower seating position, this low hood gives me still lots of visibility in front of me. I don't think that there's any way a small object or child could get in front of this car and I wouldn't notice it was there. A-pillars are pretty thin, and that allows me to have good visibility in hairpin corners, when I'm taking sharp turns in like a parking mall or something like that, a parking garage, a parking lot. I don't think I'm missing things with this. And even those mirrors, they're in a position that don't block visibility very much. All right, let's put it in sport mode. We're gonna get some fake noises and we'll get it off the line. So you're not gonna be chirping and squealing tires in this thing. It's just not the way it's going to behave, but it's enough for most people. And honestly, I don't think you buy a car like this because it's going to be fast, but I understand why you might buy another vehicle because it's faster. The piped in sound is not my favorite, so I'm going to go back to my individual mode where I've canceled that. Back to normal mode, set our cruise control at, let's say, 72 miles per hour. It has pretty good adaptive cruise, and also it will self-steer. It is not hands-free though, I'm not supposed to do that. The beauty though of the newer Honda and Acura models though is that in the past, in order for the car to continue doing the self-steering, you needed to have your hands on the wheel, but it would need you to interact with the wheel, meaning you had to kind of fight it a little bit to tell the car you're still there. These now have capacitive touch steering wheels, which means I don't have to fight the steering wheel to let it know. I just have to have my hand on the wheel and it senses that my hand is there. Much nicer. And all the tuning for this stuff has just gotten better and better and better over the past few years. These are cruel three ways to judge NVH, noise, harshness, and vibrations on, because they're concrete. They transmit a lot of noise. So if we were out in New England on some more like softer paved tarmac, I do think this would be quite a bit quieter, but still comfy, happy. It's not stiff. I'm hitting some bumps. It's composed, and it's got enough technology to make me feel like the money went to the right places, I suppose. It does not change lanes like the MDX does, but I don't really like the way the MDX changes lanes. I think it's a little too conservative. And by that I mean it would kind of cancel out when I wanted to do a lane change. And I thought it was plenty safe. I had tons of room, but it would be like, whoa, there's a car. Whereas like some other products like Super Cruise, it's like that thing sometimes will take liberties that I wouldn't even take. It's bizarre to see who tunes what and how. But I think this is a great system, and I honestly like having this where it's not fully hands-free, because it means that I still do genuinely need to be paying attention. The fuel economy has been pretty reasonable at 26 combined so far, and that's combined with me climbing a mountain with some pretty liberal use of that throttle uphill. I think you'd comfortably be able to eke out 30 miles per gallon in this, so in terms of being reasonably efficient, you're going to be okay. It does take 91 fuel, so you're going to be using premium. Factor that in however you'd like. I haven't owned a non-premium car in a long time, so I just don't really think about it. But if you are coming from a vehicle that uses regular gas and you don't want to do that, well, that's something you should think about. Here, we'll get on throttle, jump over a lane or two when we need to get off. That's great. I mean, this is doing the job for me. I'm a happy camper out here. I would happily road trip this for a very, very, very long time. So let's use some of this ground clearance to finish the video over here. This is the 2025 Acura ADX in the top trim level. I am just genuinely impressed with what is offered in what is essentially like an entry level, I'm gonna put it in park because I don't want to drive off this cliff, what's essentially an entry level luxury car for kind of everybody. It seems like something that if you were making a little money in your 20s, this is a great daily driver. If you're downsizing because you don't have your 4 kids anymore and you don't need a minivan or an MDX and you're in your 40s, 50s, 60s, this is a nice place to be. I think it's the right size. Everyone's getting cars that are a little too big, and if you're just looking to sort of downsize without being in something dinky, or making compromises because the brand that you particularly like doesn't give you the great amenities of their higher tier cars in the smaller cars. I'm looking at Mercedes like that. You know, you look at a GLA, and sure, it's a Mercedes-Benz. You can still spend a lot of money on all these trim levels, but you never really feel like you're in an E-Class or an S-Class when you get in those cars, even if you've optioned them out. In this Acura, I feel like I'm getting all of the amenities of a nice top-tier Acura in this ADX, and that says a lot. So thank you guys so much for watching, liking, commenting, and subscribing. If you are experiencing some winter blues out in New England, just get out to California for a little bit. Go for a drive on a mountain. Don't forget to respect the drive, and I'll see you in the next one. Good ergonomic design often goes overlooked because it's not a pain point and there's no learning curve. So it's just good. And then, you know, people forget to talk about it. But I think visibility, it's really easy to lack visibility in modern cars because you're trying to do so much in the way of safety. But this, I love the way this transitions too. It's just lovely.